The album was recorded not far from here, in the then newly opened studios of Island Records, to whom we were still affiliated through the Chrysalis distribution deal, or label arrangement they had with Island. And both Led Zeppelin and Jethro Tull were, in a way, the guinea pigs for their new studio. And being, as I think I recall, a converted church, Basing Street, it had, by the standards of then, all the latest in technology and the latest in studio ideas. Unfortunately, many of them were wrong. And the studio was really very, very difficult to work in. Both studios, both Studio 1 and 2. And I think Zeppelin has maybe a slightly easier time. They were in a smaller studio, I think, downstairs, and we were in a very big room upstairs most of the time. So it was a very difficult album technically to make because we just didn't know what we were hearing. And it just, everything sounded bad in the room. Everything sounded jarring and unpleasant. And when it came to mastering the record, a lot of my confidence, had gone out of the whole process. I mean, it really didn't sound to me a good album. It still sounds, in many ways to me, an album fraught with a lot of later modification in terms of trying to EQ the stereo masters for the cutting. And indeed, I listened to some digital reworkings. I mean, just denoising and EQing of the original master tapes, which miraculously have been found. I mean, the first generation master tapes. So
these have been lost for 10 years
lost in the sense that they were amongst my reclaimed collection of Jethro Tull masters, but out of, I guess thousands rather than hundreds of tapes of one sort or another, some of these things in ancient boxes with labels that don't necessarily relate to the contents any longer, it is quite difficult to pin things down. But anyway, yes, they did, like many other tapes before them, surface having been away for a while at other people's studios or left, in some cutting room in America or somewhere. Finally these things have, by and large, found their way home to me over the last few years since I've, through the release of compilations and box sets and all the rest of it, had to try to lay my hands on it all.
So did the recording take longer than it might otherwise have done because of this studio? Well,
Jethro Tull, like a lot of bands then, was necessarily given only a very finite time in which to make a new record, because the demands to get out and develop the potential of the band as a live act in different countries was really, it was a very strong sense of need, both on the part of record company management, audiences in other countries, and for us as musicians to really get out there and explore that wide world. So I think we probably had, I seem to recall that when we were working on this was either side of Christmas, and it seems like we probably had 3 or 4 weeks to do it. And as I say, 2 or 3 pieces we came in armed with as rehearsed and worked out pieces. Other songs like Locomotive Breath, for example, were very much contrived on the spot, and very unsuccessfully in terms of attempts to make the record. It was finally, this is artistic rather than technically a problem, but it was just that we couldn't somehow get the thing to click at all. It was just, I was obviously not getting across the way I wanted this song to sound to the other guys, and it ended up with me sitting out in the studio. These were the days before click tracks and things. I sat in the studio to be a click track for 4.5 minutes or whatever by playing hi-hat and bass drum all the way through the track, and then overdubbed to that with the rest of... then I added some guitar parts, electric guitar parts and acoustic guitar parts, and then tied on the front of that was John Evans' piano intro, and then Clyde Bunker overdubbed the toms and the cymbals, and Martin came and added the other electric guitar part to it. So it was one of those strange songs. It was actually... I'm not saying we weren't all in the room at the same time. We were probably all there that day, but it was certainly it was more like a later Pink Floyd recording than a Jethro Tull recording, in the sense it was made up out of a lot of overdubs of parts, and no one really knew what the end song was going to sound like except me.
But it does sound like a live song. It sounds like the sort of thing that you could walk on stage and play almost spontaneously.
Well,
it doesn't sound like
that's kind of lucky, because that's what we've had to do for the last 25 years: walk on stage and play it live. And like many songs, sometimes these things that get put together in the studio, very artificially, end up translating into great live songs. And sometimes they really don't.
So you had a larger studio than Led Zeppelin. Was this something to do with pecking orders?
It had nothing to do with pecking orders, because we would have been much more comfy in the smaller room, which didn't sound quite as bad. I think we did actually do some sessions in the smaller room, which is why I'm saying that. But it just had to do with Zeppelin had booked the place before we did and got the more cosy environment, because the big studio was the larger part of the church that had been converted, I guess, and was really more, orchestral size, or it wasn't really a rock group kind of studio, because everybody liked cozy studios in those days. It was like places that kind of had an atmosphere, not the Abbey Road kind of anonymity of the more traditional orchestral or big band studio.
What were Led Zeppelin doing? I suppose that would have been about their third album, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. It was Zeppelin. We'd already toured with Zeppelin in '69. We were their support band, and although we all got on well with Jimmy Page and Peter Grant, the manager, and even with John Bonham, if provided he was in a sort of a generous mood, as opposed to some of the hard to handle moments that he was capable of providing. But for some reason, probably entirely unimportant and lost in the mist of time, Robert Plant and I never got on. With hindsight, whatever the reason or reasons were, I'm absolutely prepared to take the blame for, because I do recall, in what I thought was good spirit, making some not badly intended comment in Melody Maker, saying with my lyrics and Led Zeppelin's music, we could be quite a good little rock and roll band, or something like that. And of course, I was just so stupidly, heavy-handed about that, not remembering, of course, that Robert Plant actually wrote the lyrics, but one thought at that time of Zeppelin as being still a kind of a blues-based band, most of whose music and a lot of the lyrics, from early on, were not lyric writing so much as just sort of taking ideas that were very traditional in the white middle-class reworkings of the Willie Dixon repertoire. So it didn't seem to me I was saying anything particularly hurtful, but of course I probably wasn't recognising the things that the other anthemic contributions to the world at that time, like Stairway to Heaven, which,
you're both using
like Aqualung, is sort of still Sunday morning fare on classic rock stations throughout North America.
You both use recorders at this time, don't you?
Oddly, yes, which is only a few days ago I was just on the phone to Martin Barr saying, Martin, have you got a recorder? Because I really think you should do it like it is on the record. You and Andy should play these two recorder bits with genuine Yamaha plastic school recorders. No flutes, no substitutions. Pardon me?
This is what they recorded on, are they?
I don't know what they were recorded on. I was way back, but whatever. They were just things you bought in the local school supply shop. Little plasticky thing. But that. But then probably you see that wouldn't be so unlikely, because that was what you did at school. That was almost, I think, for many people, their first ever shot at playing a musical instrument was at school, picking up the school recorder and having a go. So I guess that, in a way, sort of it was likely to find its way into the music of people like Led Zeppelin or Jethro Tull or Gentle Giant, for that matter. And it's really quite a horrid instrument in a way, but it, in the sense that it's a fiddly thing to play and doesn't quite have the strident scream of the Irish tin whistle,
Yes. Effective if used in moderation.
Yes, as a little bit of colour, it kind of takes you through the song.
After 25 years, where does Aqualung stand in the chronicle of Jethro Tull releases?
Well, when EMI wanted to focus on this 25-year anniversary of the Aqualung album's release and do I kind of said, well, sure, if you want to do that, it's okay. A big chance to clean up and see if we can, repress and at least get a better quality piece of music out there for people to buy or rebuy, if they haven't actually bought the CD yet. Then I couldn't have anything really against it, but I did point out to them that it would appear that in many places Aqualung was not necessarily the seminal Jethro Tull album that to a lot of people perhaps Stand Up would be, or to many more people, probably Thick as a Brick, or even the album Living in the Past, the compilation album that was largely, would be. For other people, it would be much later on. I mean, in Germany, for example, it would be as late as 1982 with Broadsword and the Beast, which in its first year of release was infinitely more successful than the Aqualung album, in that first 12-month sales picture. And it's probably still our most successful record in Germany, by that standard, of having, in its year of being a contemporary album, was far and away the most successful. And so there's a danger in focusing on that particular album, giving it perhaps the importance of Dark Side of the Moon to Pink Floyd. I don't think Aqualung is not really a very good comparison, because Jethro Tull's music before Aqualung and since, it's not that Aqualung was a sort of crowning moment where a certain kind of musical idea was at its zenith, and then afterwards we just made pale imitations. I mean, you can move on a year or two to things like Minster in the Gallery, or in Songs from the Wood, or Crest of a Knave or something. I mean, you're going to records which musically are really quite different. And I, as a singer, songwriter, flute player, whatever, I mean, if you going back a couple of nights, working on my own little rehearsals for the next tour, I was, going through the song Budapest from Crest of a Knave. Now, I could not have possibly have written a song of that detail, or that, for me, that sort of roundness and interest, and from a live performance point of view, something as rewarding to do. I couldn't have done that in 1970 or 1971. I mean, I didn't have that, I wasn't equipped to do it. But by 1986, I was similarly no longer equipped to do, with the kind of naivety and the single brushstroke, the kind of music that was evident on Aqualung or Stand Up or whatever. You change, and sophistication, literally change, is not something that is. The word sophistication has connotations of being almost a bad thing in rock music terms, because it's got too smooth and too arty and pretentious, and you leave people behind you. But sophistication in the literal sense of meaning just change. You have to accept, as you get older, you're going to refine and want to deal in terms of your own refinements and your own degree of sensitivity and engagement with the musical substance, that strange jangling conglomerate of notes and rhythms what intrigues me and moves me now is something that is necessarily more complex and more layered than would have been the case when I first started. I still enjoy listening to Muddy Waters. I love listening to very simple, direct music, but I don't enjoy playing it very much, because I just feel I need more substance. I need more to hang my hat on as a performer and as a songwriter. So just by comparison, then, something like Budapest from Crest of a Knave for me is a much more to me a more fitting example of Jethro Tull, or Ian Anderson stroke Jethro Tull at its best, more so than perhaps Aqualung, which is a good record with a bunch of good songs on it, many of which come in and out of the Jethro Tull set. But I would just say that it was, thank God it was a good rather than, by my standards, a good rather than a bad Jethro Tull album that has resulted in that degree of interest from people over the years.